my name is Dr. Jarvis Watson, and I'm the inaugural Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the School of Visual Arts. My pronouns are he, him, his. I would like to welcome you to a new video podcast called Diversity in 3D. The 3D stand for Defining and Deconstructing Through Dialogue. The mission of this podcast is to spread awareness, education, and unity through discussions that focus on topics affiliated with diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a campus, we will be successful in our mission if we are able to identify and address those issues that we do not understand or may find discomforting. Through this video podcast, we will take one of many steps to address these challenges through authentic dialogue and discourse. Throughout the year, we will be interviewing different members of the DEI Task Force, as well as members of our community to discuss various issues in detail. Our first guest is our very own Provost, Dr. Christopher Cyphers. I truly appreciate his leadership, as well as the President's investment in the newly designed Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the reason why I'm here today. So I'm really, really grateful to both of them, as well as the members of the DEI Task Force. But Provost Cyphers, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Doing excellent. Glad that you are here to be on this maiden voyage with me for Diversity in 3D, and definitely want to delve into some questions with you. So if you could, tell us a little bit about yourself and your relationship with the School of Visual Arts.
Wow. Excuse me. My relationship with SVA goes back almost to 22 years. It's kind of where I started my career as an administrator. I'd made the move from faculty to administration. I'm an historian by training.
Oh, nice.
So I came to SVA in the end of the roaring 90s.
All right.
And stayed through 2008.
Right.
I was provost from 2002 to 2008. And then I left to take a presidency for a few years, and then went on to another institution for a similar role. And then I came back to SVA in 2017. And President Rhodes was kind enough to have me back. My predecessor, Jeff Neeson, whom many will know, was retiring. And it just felt right. The timing was right. I missed SVA a lot. I missed being in an art and design environment.
Yeah.
The school before SVA was a business school focusing on fashion. But I really missed being in the company of creatives, both student and faculty. So the stars were aligned, and as it turns out, you can go home. It's not always the same, but you can go home, and I'm, almost 4 years I've been back have flown by. But one of the more important things that has emerged since my return is this focus on DEI.
Yeah.
And setting up this office, while I can't take credit for it entirely, there were a lot of people who were involved in it.
Yeah.
It is. I think it's one of the more important changes that we've seen in the last few years, and I think it marks a real turning point for SVA when it comes to discussions about race, ethnicity, equity, and inclusion.
So I would say for you, or even for the campus, what was the inspiration behind the development of this office and this position?
Sure. Diversity had always been a topic of discussion. I would characterize SVA as a progressive institution.
Right.
Being in New York City, being an art school, having a faculty of close to 1,000 working artists, designers, writers, critics, scholars. And so the subject of diversity was one that came up rather frequently. And but then it was sort of defined rather narrowly in terms of race, ethnicity,
Yeah.
and well, we need to recruit more students of color. I'm not even sure we were using that term back then. And we need to diversify the faculty in terms of race, ethnicity. And then, of course, that definition broadened to include people, the LGBTQ plus community,
Definitely.
and differently abled folks, and the list goes on. What we hadn't really talked about in these conversations was the equity and the inclusion part.
Yeah.
We just assumed, and I suspect a lot of people starting out in this area assume that if you have diversity, you've diversified the student body, you've diversified the faculty, that everyone is, everyone feels equally a part of the community. But that proved not to be the case. Not that SVA was the least bit hostile to people of difference, but it was enough of an issue, which was magnified 100-fold over the summer.
Yeah.
And I'll say that the creation of this office, the creation of the position that we were fortunate enough to find you to lead, was not in response to that. Just by way of some quick background, DEI was a big part of our strategic plan, which was adopted by the board of directors in 2018. So we're now almost 3 years into that plan. And the strategic planning committee felt strongly that diversity, equity, and inclusion had to be a part of the plan, that if we were going to fulfill our mission, if we were going to really make good on our core values, then DEI had to be a big part of that. So almost a year ago to date, we had concluded a search. We didn't get a huge response to our recruiting efforts, but we did have two very good candidates whom we interviewed. And then 2 weeks later, the pandemic hit. And as we all know, everything, life as we knew it came to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
And, SVA, like every institution, quickly transitioned from business as usual to triage mode.
Right.
And we've been in that state ever since, with a couple of noted exceptions. I referenced this summer the tremendous the social unrest, the outcry from all members of our community and the American population as well after the murder of George Floyd at the hands of the police. He certainly wasn't the first and hasn't been the last, but there was something about that really that ignited these passions that were not new. I mean, they've been there. They've been at times they've perhaps been suppressed somewhat, but
right.
SVA heard from students, faculty, staff, alumni who were quite critical of SVA.
Yeah.
And I sort of naively was like, what did we do? It wasn't necessarily what we did. It's what we didn't do. And we heard for the first time, really, in a way we couldn't miss, was hearing from students of color, allies of students of color.
Yeah.
Again, both, and that was coming from the staff as well. I think the issue of racial equality, social justice, It affected nearly every facet of our society, but it really shone a bright light on where we probably weren't, doing our best to create the most uh, equitable and inclusive community.
Right.
Students were telling us that, as a Black student, for example, I don't feel I'm in a class of all white students. My teacher, um, not with malice, but will say something that that is troubling to me, that student of color.
Right.
But to the white students, it doesn't. It's kind of, it doesn't resonate with them the way it resonates with that particular student.
Mm-hmm.
And we started to hear from those students that um, I wouldn't characterize it as hostile, but I wouldn't characterize it as inclusive either. So it was decided back around, well, June, really when all this was going down, that we would relaunch the search for a DEI director.
Right.
And so the search committee that conducted the first search got together, and I should say at the time that the school was making pretty significant budgetary cuts for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
It's been a really rough year for us, for everybody in higher education, for much of our economy.
Indeed. Yeah, it's been rough times. Yeah.
And but the president and I and others really felt that now was the time to make a move on this DEI front. And it was one thing to write empathetic letters of support for our students and our community members of color, and even those that allies of our friends and colleagues of color. We needed to do something concrete, and something that demonstrated our commitment to these things, rather than just give lip service to them. And so we rewrote the job description, and we went out with a recruitment campaign, and the response was a lot different than the first time.
Yeah.
But our ad was now among 15 ads for a DEI director.
Yeah.
Before, maybe it was one or two. So we were certainly not alone in responding to this historical event that was unfolding before our eyes over the summer. It's time to elevate the discourse on questions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think we as a community are ready to ask the difficult questions and confront the reality, good, bad, or indifferent,
Right.
and then make changes, appropriate changes. It truly pains me that anyone would think, any member of our community would think that they don't feel that they are respected equally with others, that they don't feel included, that they feel somehow singled out. That to me, hearing that over the summer, which was sort of holding up a mirror in front of us, and seeing reflected back this reality that maybe we knew in a inchoate sense, but to have it reflected back so starkly was eye-opening. And it really demonstrated just how that we were on the right track because
Right.
we started this process, 2 years earlier, and it was temporarily derailed because of the pandemic. But once we sort of got ourselves back together and organized, we had some real important conversations among ourselves about where we were probably falling short, and that informed the search that ultimately led us to you.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for, you never know what kind of conditions happen prior to you coming into a new institution, and seeing some similar things that I saw at my former institution. That once I was able to do a little bit more research to realize, like, oh, you're at the genesis of something that has been happening in a lot of different schools. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what other schools fail to realize is, like, if you don't respond, or you do give like more lip service, that you'll get these responses from the student body as well as the faculty and staff that's just asking a question like, hey, well, do we matter? Does our lives have value? And then I think to respond to that in the way that you did is the reason why I really wanted to come to School of Visual Arts. And I'm just really great, like I said, really appreciative to the ones who I've met, on the DEI Task Force that have interviewed me, as well as some one of the students interviewed with you as well. But for all those nameless people and people I haven't met yet, I'm looking forward to meeting them, to let them know how humbled I am to be here, but also driven by the needs that you kind of addressed before, to really meet people where they are, understand where
Right.
they're coming from, and start this new movement, I would say.
So, I mean, can I ask you a question?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's
This goes both
reciprocity.
ways. All
This
right.
is reciprocity today. Yeah.
Uh, to the extent you can speak to it, what is your vision for this role, given where you're standing right this moment,
Yeah.
in 4 months,
And,
given your
and
background?
yeah, I would say reimagine and continue to reimagine what diversity, equity, inclusion looks like. And I think it's a process. I don't think it's like a destination. It's always something like you always kind of go back and kind of think about what can you do a little bit differently.
Right.
Stop, breathe, and do no harm. And so my vision right now is to stop what we're doing, not in this aspect of just like halting, but pausing and kind of catching our breath, which is the breathe part, and
Yeah, we need that.
yeah, and to see where we are, because like you said, it wasn't just COVID; it was Black Lives Matter movement and all the things that came with that. I think the aspects of the disparities that came along with COVID, but also the loss I think everyone had, whether it be loss of life, loss of loved ones, loss of jobs, loss of stability. I think those things really have an emotional drain and emotional impact. And I think what we saw in the recent year or so was like based off where you were on the stratification of like SES, socioeconomic status, you felt it a little harder than other folk. So really having all of us as a community, as an institution, just sitting down and kind of say, okay, where are we now? What are our priorities? And that's really getting together with the members and the new members of the DEI Task Force, developing some new working groups, and really just doing some goal setting, doing some mission statement development, as well as redefining what diversity, equity, inclusion looks like at School of Visual Arts. Yeah, I think like my vision right now is hearing and listening and engaging, but few years down the road, I would love to have a place where people feel safe to be who they are,
Right.
to really embrace and have their intersectional identities affirmed through practice, through language, through activities, through our standards that we set, our core values, some of the initiatives that we can actually put in place. That SVA, on top of what they're doing already, is actually amplifying some of the things that either are there or adding some things on to that need to be there. So
Right. One of the you mentioned loss. I mean, God, we've we've suffered a great deal, and I think you're right. I mean, people
Yeah.
have from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different races, have experienced this pandemic,
Yeah.
the economic fallout in different ways, and uh, that's been a real eye opener.
Yeah.
Um, it just magnified the inequities that exist in American society,
Yeah. Definitely.
which interestingly can go from electing Barack Obama to George or to Donald Trump. That just.
Mm. I wasn't going to bring that up.
Well, I just
But
as
that's
it
a
was coming
factor.
out, I was thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't mention that. But
Yeah. Yeah. But that's a factor. But but
we as a
yeah.
society do have the capability of I think doing the right thing, and I think that's something endemic to
Yeah.
American life. Uh, but I wanted to point out something that you said in your interview that resonated really with me,
Mm-hmm.
and that I didn't really hear from other candidates was, um, you know, you weren't coming with any preconceived notions. You weren't coming with uh, this sort of rigid agenda. You weren't going to sit us down and tell us, okay, this is what you're doing wrong and this is what you need to do. You
Mm-hmm.
you said, your goal or your way of working is to meet people where they are, and I think
Yeah.
you sized us up pretty accurately. And I know you're still in the process of sort of assessing where we are on the DEI spectrum, if that's
Yeah.
even a term.
Yeah.
But that's been helpful, and I think that's going to be that's ultimately going to serve us well. You're going to get more. We're going to get more buy-in
Yeah.
by acknowledging where wherever everyone stands right now, and building upon that, as opposed to coming in with this construct that may or may not work for the folks at SVA, and in imposing that.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that was important, really important.
Yeah, a good friend of mine who I worked with early in my earlier career. She's a big researcher. Harvard. I mean, graduated from Stony Brook, but also was Harvard educated from Southside Jamaica, Queens. I mean, just where like from an attitude down to us Timberland, she was that was her. And not like being apologetic for being who she was, and it was great to see her just really articulate this one statement. She said, when you do research or when you ask questions within about communities, you can't do it from the outside. You have to understand who's in the community. You have to build relationships. You have to develop trust. And she said, you do research within the community, not at the community or to the community. It's like there's this thing that you have to be indoctrinated in, and not just say, all right, I'm done and I'll see you later. It has to be this sustainable. You want to be here. You really care about us. And I think the word care really something that I think sometimes we overlook. But that care goes into all my strategic planning, goes into my preparation, goes into the fact that I can't sleep at night sometimes, and I got to have a piece of paper next to me and jotting some things down, or getting up way earlier than I used to, just so I can get a jump on things. So when I'm actually speaking or connecting or setting up the presentation or the Zoom,
Right.
I'm doing it in a really authentic and prepared way, so they know that it's not just the words that I'm saying, but it's the feeling and emotion behind that really like, all right, Dr. Watson or Jarvis, he's here to one, understand who we are, but also walk with us and create this mission. So that's pretty much what we're doing in the next month or so. Doing some diversity roundtables with our working groups, and really sitting down with different stakeholders on campus and
Mm-hmm.
asking questions. Hey, what's been in your experience? What would you like to see? And how could we be of service?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, how does one become a DEI director? How does one find themselves
Wow.
in that role? What's the trajectory? What's been your sort of path to this to this position?
I mean, you know, I was when I we were kind of going over the preparation for this conversation. I thought about my parents. I
Uh-huh.
thought about my parents. I was thinking about, like, you know, sometimes people start with their first job, and but I had to really think about what my parents instilled in me. They were both from the South. My mom's from South Carolina. My dad, rest in peace, is from North Carolina. But
Mm.
they both were hardworking individuals who were graduates of historically black colleges and universities. And their
Okay.
college was Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina, which definitely want to kind of revisit now at an older age. They brought me and my sister down there when we were younger. But what you learn at HBCUs is all about identity, self worth, self value, but value of community as well. And my dad was also a teacher. And he was a science teacher,
Oh.
which was really rare in certain
Mm-hmm.
places to see a black man during the 60s and 70s teaching science. And something my dad would always do, he would always challenge his young folk, and not let them think less than who they were. Like, listen, if you're in this class, you're gonna learn, you're gonna be able to do this stuff. You just gotta learn the process. And the amount of respect that my father got, as well as my mom. My mom was all, she also worked in it's now Verizon, but it used to be New Jersey Bell. I don't know if everybody, I'm kind of dating myself right now.
Ma Bell, right?
Yeah. But they both collectively really instill a sense of, like, ethnic pride, um, uh, understand, how to be respectful. Definitely, really from a Southern perspective, like, understand, your manners and things like that, but respect your elders. But there was this thing about community that they always are exposed me to. I mean, from the books in our houses, even the art books that we had in the house, it was this expansion of learning a little bit more. And I think diversity, equity, inclusion officers, they really don't go to college, aspiring to be a DEI person, and
Right.
it's something that I think is somewhat genetic. But I think through experiences, like, I did a lot of work with pre-college programs in historically marginalized neighborhoods. Worked with historically marginalized students in the EOP program. Worked as a dean for Office of Multicultural Affairs, where we did a lot of education and awareness about how we all are connected, through some type of experience, and our intersectionalities within our identities makes us dynamic, but also connects us as well. And then being able to have the opportunity to, for all that, like, maybe 14 or 13 years of doing this type of work, somebody was like, you know what, there's an opportunity for you. Would you like to be the interim chief diversity officer? I'm just like, yeah, this is definitely what I've been preparing for. I'm thinking maybe somewhere down the road there might be like a program for diversity, equity, inclusion officers, where you have a doctoral degree, because it definitely takes all facets of who you are and
Sure.
your professional background to do this type of work. But there's this thing inside of you that really can't be described, of, like, your connection with the people, your willingness to not accept the status quo. A lot of us are called disruptors. We disrupt the things that are happening, but not in a bad way, in a way that kind of agitates the situation to get people to kind of see things a little bit differently. But the key word is see me, hear
Right.
me, understand
Right.
where I'm coming from. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if I can do that in so many different ways, whether it be the curriculum, whether it be the education that the diversity education that we provide, the coming together with all the different members of the campus, to work in one shared vision and one goal, and moving in one direction, um, and to put all those things within a DEI context. I mean, I think I was definitely blessed, and I think ordained in some aspects to do this type of work.
Sure. Beyond the obvious, what are some of the differences, at least in the context of DEI, between being at a large Research One university with tens of thousands of students to a private college, art college? I mean, are
Um,
there similarities? Are there things that are similar regardless of the institutional type, um, or are there some major differences that are worth pointing out?
I think the differences that I saw were when you're in an institution with 25,000 students, undergrad and grad,
Mm-hmm.
you tend to get lost in the numbers, and sometimes the phrase comes up, you become a number.
Right.
And what I've always done was try to make that less of that narrative and more of, all right, you're in a big space. So how do you navigate this? And really asking the students that. So I had to create different connections with people on campus. So when something did happen or something did go awry with a student, I was able to call somebody by first name and say, hey, I have a student coming over. And also with that professional relationship, there was the informal relationships that you have. So making sure that you were part of the socials and gatherings, and making sure, even playing on softball teams to kind of understand a little bit more about who's there. So you build this community.
Does that mean you're starting a softball team at SVA?
Oh, hey, if we got the listen, you don't have to be you know top athlete to do that. You just have the time and I guess space to want to embarrass yourself or just do
Well,
that
that would be me
collectively.
embarrassing myself, but
Oh
for
man,
the cause, yeah, I'll do it.
yeah, I didn't realize like softball and baseball were not my sports. So I'm really talking personally. But at School of Visual Arts, it's one thing I even talked about on the interview. It was like building relationships is key,
Right.
and I think that at the School of Visual Arts, there are these kind of like small communities of individuals that I really, every time I talk to a different department or different area, there's a certain level of pride that everyone takes. It's like their own little community, own little I would say even town in some aspects. So I guess my job here is to help everyone understand that, hey, we can connect our towns. We can have these socials. We can have these opportunities to discuss and dialogue. We can have these joint kind of ventures that, for the most part, all is for our students. And one thing I love about having a smaller kind of population is that you don't have to get lost in the number kind of game, but you can establish yourself very quickly as a leader, as a thought leader, as an artist, as
Mm-hmm.
a somebody who kind of breaks the mold, and and that gets recognized very quickly.
Sure.
And I've seen that a lot, just with your how you highlight and showcase student success here, and
Right.
the willingness of students to really to connect with you, even though I know they're extremely busy. But once you make that connection, it's something real. It's something that you really can't just say, all right, I'll see you later. No, we're going to see each other again. And you have to really
Yeah.
cultivate that relationship. I wish I could be there in person to do that, but I've been really doing
Well,
that. Yeah.
in all due course, we all wish we could be there
Yeah.
personally, and hopefully that will be the case for the fall. Do you see the ability to do that here?
Oh, definitely.
Not just for African American students, but
Yeah.
students of the whole rainbow of
Yeah.
identities.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great question. And like I said, I'm really doing this in all respect to those who graduated from historically black colleges and universities. And so I'm really talking about it from what I've seen and heard from a lot of friends or people I know have come up. Like I said, my parents
Sure.
that have come through that matriculation. The faculty really meet the students where they are. There's a number of folk that I've just have told me a number of stories about how inspirational and how instrumental their faculty were to not just their education, but their sense, once again, of self-worth. And to a point where they were intrusive in their lives to not let them fall below the standard of excellence. Not perfection, but excellence, like working hard every day, understanding that, if you come into a sense of failure, there's always a way of developing some solutions and using it as a learning experience. Connecting with your fellow classmates for support, but also even the way you dressed on certain days. You didn't come to school, looking wearing sweats. I think in certain HBCUs, there's a certain day that you had to dress up and really show your I think sometimes we call it Sunday's best.
Mm-hmm.
There was a certain pride that you had, and even with some of the traditions that came along with that was something that all alumni knew about. So I think there's some really great opportunities that we can kind of help our faculty either revisit or enhance some of the things they're doing already to connect with either their fellow faculty members as well as the students that they really see talent, opportunity, excellence, expertise. I think it's important to understand the gifts that they have that can be honed and invested in,
Right.
and hopefully, that they, it leads to not just a job, but a fruitful career where they can actually reciprocate that when they come back as alumni. But I think we really have to start with our curriculum, how we engage, with our students, how we develop our pedagogy, our teaching style in a way that really kind of revolutionizes, how we used to think about education and success, but provide more access, for our students to be great.
Right. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
The curriculum is a piece that a piece of this larger puzzle that I've been thinking a lot about
Yeah.
in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think where our faculty would benefit would be to understand what you've described as decolonizing the curriculum.
Yeah.
We're the product of our environments, of our education,
Mm-hmm.
and when you have a predominantly white male faculty that who's sort of quote unquote classically trained, whether they're a philosopher or they've come out of a traditional MFA program, they bring that to their teaching.
Yeah.
Which in most regards is a positive thing. That's why they're here. But they're also, I mean, I guess what we're hoping is that people can sort of transcend that their training, their professional and personal experiences, to see how what they teach is received by students who are not like themselves.
Yeah.
And I think you just adding a couple of Black authors or a couple of queer artists to the curriculum and calling it diversity, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It needs to be, I think, reconceptualized really from the bottom up. And that's a big task, but I think it's one that will serve all of us extremely well.
Yeah. Even if you break down, the three words: diversity, equity, inclusion. It's like diversity is that result. What it looks like. What the numbers are. And certain theories of like the structural diversity, like the demographics and who and definitely representation is key. But it's not just a representation; it's also the inclusion piece where these conversations are and these interactions are being done within a brave and safe space. I would say to combine the both, but also having that cultural relevancy and sensitivity, but also importance in how we see art and through the lenses of different folk who are seeing it through intersectional lenses. And I think it's important that we embrace that, and even our starting from our syllabi to how we say good morning and how we use our pronouns, saying he, him, his, but also realizing that if there is a language barrier, that there are some things that we can put in place to kind of bridge that gap. But the equity aspect comes in also, are we providing enough tools and resources and I guess techniques and strategies in order to make sure everybody's getting, even as we are talking, there's the ADA aspect that we have with our closed
Sure.
captioning
Mm-hmm.
on this call. So, how many different ways can we see or reimagine or revisit or like you said, transcend some of the things that we've been doing currently to really make sure we're challenging ourselves to provide the best space and opportunity for our students. And I will say faculty and staff and administration to learn, because I think this is
Sure.
definitely in the same way that we were interviewing each other. There's a reciprocity that needs to
Right.
be in place here.
I think it's important to point out that we need to give credit where credit is due,
Mm,
and that that there are department chairs and there are faculty members who really are trying
yes.
really hard on the equity and the inclusion part, not just the diversity part.
Right.
And the same is true, I think, for members of the administration. Um, I don't think there's a resistance to this,
Hmm.
but uh, you know, and I think there's a willingness to learn and
Yeah.
to try to do something different. Change is, as we all know, is difficult.
Yeah.
As you alluded to earlier, we've been through a lot of it
Hmm.
just in the last year um, on many fronts. But a reimagining, another word I think you used earlier,
Yep.
reimagining what it means to educate a young artist, designer, writer, critic, um, because I think what they get here, they carry forward in their professional lives.
Yes.
And one of the benefits, the value added from being at a school like SVA and being on campus and being in New York is that there's an opportunity to be exposed to all of that. Um, I think we need to do a better job at creating those opportunities for exposure and allow for more disruption. And
Right.
artists are notorious disruptors
And
of the status quo.
that's what
So
drew me here. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you see it in a lot of student work and in the work of the faculty.
Yeah.
So the pieces are there. Um, it's putting them all together and assessing where we are now versus where we want to be.
Yeah.
And I guess that's when not your job alone, but sort of part of your charge is to undertake that assessment and
Yeah.
to articulate in collaboration with your colleagues where where School of Visual Arts wants to be in terms of being diverse, being equitable, and being inclusive.
Yeah. As you're sharing that, I'm thinking about the word process.
Mm.
And you and I both went through a doctoral process, and and when you start,
Live
it's
to
like,
tell the tale.
yes. And somebody always said, it's rigorous but doable. And the other thing they would say that you need to embrace the process. And if anything, I want to echo and amplify in our discussion is that this is going to be a process, and that's why I love the people that we work
No
with on
shortcuts, right?
the diversity task
Please
force. Like, you
be
can understand that it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some difficult conversation. It's going to take
right.
some hurt feelings. It's going to, some people will feel some shame. Some people will feel a little bit of hurt. But together, we will provide space for people making mistakes. We'll provide space for people to learn. We'll provide space for people to make, to give a little bit of hiccups here and there. And we have to do that with each other. And we have to make sure that we are humble to know that, even though we might hold a title of provost or director of diversity, equity, inclusion, we make mistakes as well. And we are learning through this process. So it's something that, like I said, to meet people where they are is really to understand a little bit more about who you are.
Right.
And to understand that as much as you think it's a lot that you still do not. And I
Right.
think that's what kind of helps us to be successful, to know, like, what else is
Yeah.
out there. Yeah.
Well, I think that's wisdom to know what you do, to accept that you don't know everything,
Yeah.
and that there's a willingness to always keep learning about oneself
Yeah.
and the world one occupies and the influence that one has on other people's lives. And you mentioned creating safe spaces. Um, I people are going to make mistakes. People are. Yeah, I think there's a certain degree of anxiety that comes with having these conversations,
Oh yes.
and nobody wants to be the person in the room who unwittingly says the wrong thing.
Right.
Not again, not with malice, but you know, you don't know what you don't know
Yeah.
until you someone points out you don't know it, or you
Yeah.
figure it out on your own. And creating opportunities for people to to sort of explore their own uh, experiences, their own inherent biases,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and
Yeah.
and acknowledge that those do to a certain extent inform their interactions with others. And if you're a provost, a faculty member, or the DEI director, um, that's going to be projected onto the people with whom you interact.
Definitely.
Um, so yeah, I and that's one of the things that I think we really need to work on, is creating those spaces, creating the opportunities to have the conversation, but also having some rules, I guess you might say, that this is sort of a judgment free. So we might point out that what you're saying has certain implications, but no one's going to get beat up over it. No one's going to be publicly humiliated or hung out to dry
Right.
for uh, for saying something that one might perceive as inappropriate or whatever.
Yeah, I think another word we can definitely either redefine or reimagine or revisit is accountability. I think a lot of times the word accountability comes in aspects of some type of punitive perspective to it,
Right.
But sometimes the accountability is you taking it upon yourself to be like, you know what, I made a mistake. Let me learn a little bit more. And then there are some extremes where, accountability comes with, well, now you have to go see the compliance person to talk about
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
But I think there are some things we can do through education, through training, through dialogue that we can kind of look at the severity of things and impacts and help the person or groups understand a little bit more about how to think a little bit before you say something, or
Right.
take the moment to pause before you do harm or
Right.
do
Right.
some or unexpected harm that just like, okay, let me think about this twice, because once again, it's like I said, it's not about you or me, it's about this community, and how are
Right.
we really creating a climate that really embraces diverse learning, so
Since you arrived, have members of the community, students, faculty, found your door, as it were,
oh
your
yeah,
virtual
yeah,
door,
yeah.
knocking?
Actually, you have a couple yeah, there was a student who I'm gonna keep that student's name
Yeah, you
yeah,
don't have to
yeah,
mention any names. I'm just
but had some financial issues, and I was able to connect the student with the office and help the student out, and I got a wonderful email from the student saying thank you, everything got taken care of. So I was just like, oh, we got one, we
yeah,
saved one.
yeah.
And there was a student who used to go here who is now a grandmother who reached out to me via the diversity.edu, diversity at sva.edu, and I was able to connect that person with the registrar's office. And I think this person may be like a few credits away from graduating,
Mm,
and so I think I want to kind of hear about what's happening with that student, a former student, so they can be truly called
right.
an alumnus. And but the MSU students, the BSU students, BASA, we're working on some things right now where we doing something for Black History Month, and hopefully we can do some things for Women's History Month. But one of the things we did was Instagram takeover, where every day for this week of the last week of Black History Month, which is not the last week of Black History. Just want to make sure I put that out there.
Absolutely. It's not contained to 28 or 29 days out of
Right.
the year. It's every day is Black History Month.
Right. And I think that it was really cool because they were asking me questions like, well, what artists or books or movies or things that did you like that within the context of African American or Black art? And could you share some of those names or share some of those artists, share some of those movies? And, all through the week on Instagram, I was watching some of the updates and I was like, oh man, this is cool. It's like, even though we're not in connection with each other physically, there's these interactions we've had that have resulted in some things happening. And also, like I said, big shout out to VASA and BSU and MSU, but also to our communications department, Joyce and Rodrigo. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you hoping to accomplish with the video podcast series, the 3D diversity in 3D?
So this is in combination or collaboration with some of the like diversity roundtable discussions that we want to do, the diversity audit that which is part of that the process of the diversity roundtables are part of the diversity audit process. But as we are doing things that might be novel or might be new, there may be some like misunderstandings or maybe some people aren't clear about what the mission is. I really wanted to expose some of the people that are on the DEI Task Force and actually have them talk about some DEI issues from their particular lens. And it's almost like a soft opening, but it's infusion of some of the terms, some of the language, some of the experiences, some of the, like I said, the terminology, the theory, but also just the conversation that we would like to see happen on a regular basis. And in the same way, I think that even the coffee chat has done in bringing more of the community to the students or to the staff and to the faculty. I want to do that within a DEI context, minus the coffee. And hopefully one day we will be in person to kind of have more of the interaction. But it's important to kind of recognize those trailblazers and those leaders on campus who are here. Right. Sometimes we're always looking outside like, well, what artist or what person can we get? There's some great people right here, like you said earlier, that we need to kind of highlight and showcase. And they can even share about some things that you may not know they're doing on the side or.
We've got faculty who are doing some really innovative work. I think speaking to them would be great, as well as you said, other members of the task force.
Right.
It's a great way to get to really know the people with whom you spend most of your time.
Yeah.
At least your working time, your colleagues and the students. Where will this live, this podcast?
Right now, it's going to live on our YouTube channel, and it also will be and big shout out to Greg. Was it her boy? He works in communications, and he's been working on our redesigning of our diversity webpage. And so that should be coming out pretty soon, but it'll live there. But also we'll be sharing some updates on Instagram. And big shout out to Brian and Eric that work in VAP as well as Gail. And definitely want to make sure we recognize them. But Instagram, we hopefully even have some some live conversations on Instagram. But we'll have an IGTV component that goes along with that as well. Cool. Yeah.
I'm really excited about where the DEI can go with SVA, and I commend those who really push to have this as part of the college's strategic plan. It is there in black and white, for all to see, and we've got our work cut out for us. But I think there's the will, and there's the desire, and increasingly the resources. I mean, this is not the best time to launch a new department, but
Hey,
we
it
will
is.
get back to where we were soon enough. But I think this is something that is going to excite our students, our faculty, staff, alum, friends of the school.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I know that I'm really excited to have you here, excited to be having this conversation, um, and excited to learn something new myself.
yeah, yeah. That's like I said. That's part of the process, and I was hoping that's something that each time we interact or do something that walk away transformed or changed just a little bit. So that I mean that it goes a long way. And as we wrap this conversation up, we have one more question for you, and
Sure.
this will be I guess a question I may have for every guest that we have on here. This will be my thing. If there's one thing that you could identify being proud of, what would that be? If there was one thing you were proud of, either being an SBA or just in life, what would that thing be?
Hmm. Well, on a personal level, I suppose, getting a PhD is, as you said, no small task, and
Oh no.
that's something to be proud of. Um, I think in the context of SVA, I'm proud of being part of an organization that has evolved over the years, over the decades, um, and I take pride in seeing the successes of our students. Their successes are our successes.
Yeah.
Um, so when I hear about a filmmaker who's an alum or an artist who wins a Fulbright fellowship or
Yeah.
hits it big, and even people whose work is sort of behind the scenes, but nevertheless important in shaping a message, um, an important social message. I get really excited, and I'm like, hey, that's my school.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, I didn't go here, um, and I'm not an artist, but I get to experience all that vicariously through the students, through the faculty.
Yeah.
Um, my office is on the printmaking floor, and the smell of the ink. There's something
Mm,
about that. Um, it's just a very visceral uh, example of the creative process at work.
yeah.
You can hear, you can smell the work being created, and it's it's really quite exciting. Um, you know, so I guess being part of something bigger than myself, but still uh, having contributed to building that thing
Right.
is a source of pride. It's not necessarily, well, I'm proud of having created a couple, few of these programs, or you know, um, individual accomplishments. I think the things that I look back on and say, that was great. That
Yeah.
was important. Are the things that I've done with other people, colleagues, both within SVA and outside SVA. Building something is really a great feeling.
Man.
um,
Yeah.
and learning from the process of building something.
Hmm.
Even if you trip and fall a couple times and or
Yeah.
hit a few speed bumps, which is always inevitable in the creative process. Um, but it's that's gratifying. You know, I guess in that sense, we're all artists. That we're all creating something, uh, and it's not all science, as they say. It's part art, part science.
Man, that's a great metaphor, and I don't know. I don't think I could end the conversation any better than that. So I just want to say, Chris, it's been a pleasure. speaking with you, and like to thank you for your time and your thoughts and your metaphor. It was right on point. I just
Thank you
want
for
to
having me.
I just want to thank you for taking this maiden voyage with me. And then just like continue to, as we continue to build our relationship, professional relationship, and understand a little bit more about, our visions and our shared vision together. Just really
Right.
looking, this is really a great opportunity for me to just to share this with you right now. And diversity in 3D will be coming to you hopefully every other week or so. And but to know that you were the first guest is really an honor.
Well, it's an honor. For me,
Yeah,
it's an honor to be your first guest.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I can't wait to see where where this goes. And this is another of those things that we're building as a community that
yeah.
I can already sense is going to be big and impactful.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
it's certainly something that I think we'll all look back on and say, "Wow, we were part of something really important, really cool,
man.
and
Yeah,
really meaningful for the thousands of people who are affiliated with SVA in one way or another."
yeah. Part of the cornerstone. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you for giving me a chance to uh, share some of my thoughts, as rambly as they might be. Forgive me.
Hey, it's all part of the fabric. So we just this is part of the dialogue. This
Right.
this is the cool part. Yeah. But in addition to you, I'd also like to thank the staff of VAP for assisting with putting this together. Eric Corio, Brian Smith, Anthony Coriayo, and Gail Anderson. Thank you for putting like the designs you see behind me. I'll probably have a couple more designs I want to share with you, but the intros that you'll see and all the graphics, definitely a great department to work with. But please stay tuned for our next show. Like I said, pop in a couple of weeks, which will address mental health in our BIPOC community and other historically marginalized communities. But take care and be well, and we'll see you soon.